The New Jersey Public Education Coalition is a group of people, including school administration, Board of Ed, education professionals, teachers, and concerned parents who are all concerned about the fact that public education right now is facing an existential crisis. The coalition was formed just under 3 years ago. We have approximately 3,000 members statewide. And our goal is to protect diversity and inclusion in our public education system. We also want to ensure that every child has a safe and inviting place to attend school, free from harassment, intimidation, and real quick, I became involved in this about 4 years ago when I began speaking at my local school board meetings because I saw right-wing extremism coming into our district and a lot of disinformation and misinformation. And I was immediately subjected to catcalling, interruption, name-calling, which was then extended onto social media pages local to my district, which is Wayne Township in North Jersey. I began to realize why people on our side of the question were not getting up and speaking at board meetings, and decided something had to be done to level the playing field. So we created the coalition, and the coalition motto is to educate first, to make sure that people know disinformation and misinformation and know the truth, to also then help them collaborate, to form collaborative groups within their districts so that they can then feel comfortable standing up and speaking before their boards of ed to protect their local districts. Paul and I have been talking about this immigration issue for several months now. We have been talking about it before the election even happened, and felt that it was very important for us to put this presentation together so that we could start educating people on the problems, how to address them, and the issues of the day. Paul is a public education advocate, frequent contributor to the coalition and our commitment to educating all stakeholders in public education with factual information. He was a long-term school board member for over 20 years, works as a provider of professional development services to school districts that advance student achievement. He also sits on the board of directors for refugee assistance Morris Apartment. Those are both categories. Okay. If someone has their mic on, if you could please mute yourself, we'd appreciate it. Refugee Assistance Morris Partners is a refugee resettlement organization. They're doing business as Assisted Insight, and Paul also provides governance and change management guidance to school boards of education and nonprofits. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Paul for our presentation on responding to immigration enforcement, steps for protecting students and families in your learning community.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. I'm really was talking to Mike before we began and was surprised at the registration number. Typically, a lot of people register knowing that if they can't attend while it's live, they'll get the recording later. And between last week and tonight, we have well over 100 people who have registered for this information session. And that's really gratifying for us. It means that we're providing useful information that people need and are interested in. It also says that this is a subject that's really heavy on our hearts right now, and something that maybe there's not a lot of information coming out yet. And so I hope this is a useful presentation for you. Here's what we're doing tonight. We're going to talk about, first I want to say that this presentation is in no way political. It's strictly business. We're going to look at measures being taken across the country to support and protect immigrant students in our schools through an understanding of what the law allows. So first, we're going to look at where we are today, the legal context, some recent developments. We'll talk about the potential impact that simply the fear and uncertainty of immigration enforcement on our school grounds could cause, and likely is beginning to cause. There's also an impact on families. We've invested a lot of resources on family engagement and making promises to students and families that if they send their kids to school, they'll be safe. If they work hard in school, they will have a future of hope and relevance and meaning. And some of those promises are in jeopardy right now. So there's an impact on the education program and students, on families. So we're going to talk about what schools can be doing right now in response to that. And also, importantly, talk about engagement with law enforcement. One thing we want to make clear is this presentation is information only. It's not legal advice. Most or many of the slides cite the source of the information, and Mike has put together, we continue to put together a whole list of resources that you'll be able to refer to later for whatever purpose you need to follow up on some of the action items that you're going to hear about tonight. Boards of education and administrators should consult their board attorney about taking proposed actions. Certainly before you change your policies, because we're going to talk about policies, but let your board attorney know what it is that you seek to accomplish and ask how to go about it. If you ask a board attorney if you should do something, they will tell you no because they're very risk averse, which is what they see as being a big part of their job, and it is. But sometimes they can be risk averse to the point where they block what you want to do. And we're going to keep everything within the bounds of the law. But we're going to recommend some steps that you take to basically fortify your policies. So why are we committed to this subject of protecting our students and families from immigration enforcement? What I did is I did a search of district mission statements just in the state of New Jersey, and this is a sampling. What I did the search on was looking for mission statements that include reference to all students, every student, include references to valuing diversity, include references to keeping schools a safe learning environment. And these are all themes that are consistent through a lot of mission statements. So we know already that these are values that our community holds dear. I did not grow up in a diverse community, but I'm proud that my kids were raised in a diverse community. And diversity is one of the great things about New Jersey. We complain a lot about the taxes and other things and traffic and everything else. And where I live, we're complaining about traffic because of mines collapsing. We're kind of right in the thick of that right here. I live in Wharton. Um, but our kids are better prepared citizens for having grown up here in the midst of this diversity. So it's something I suspect we all value very much. I'm starting to see an activity in the chat. And so one thing I meant to ask, and Mike will kind of keep an eye on this, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please do so in the chat. We can create a little bit of community here tonight in the midst of all the information. Tell us, what brings you to this webinar tonight, where you're from, and also if you have questions during the presentation, we'll certainly want to address those at the end. So feel free to use the chat, and Mike, I appreciate you keeping an eye on that. Here's where we are today. This administration made mass deportations a day one promise. And from every indication, whether it's about immigration or anything else, this administration seems pretty determined to follow through on all their promises. And it looks more and more every day like Project 25 promises. There's not a lot of reporting yet on enforcement actions taking place in schools. I've heard of people impersonating ICE officers for whatever reason. But I'm not hearing a lot of stories of actual enforcement taking place yet. But it's worth noting that a 13-year Department of Homeland Security policy that provided and identified schools as among protected areas, along with hospitals and places of worship, that longstanding policy has been rescinded. And the quote here is from a Department of Homeland Security statement, reassuring us that criminals will no longer be able to hide in America's schools and churches to avoid arrest. So I suppose I should be reassured by that, but if I'm honest, I didn't know it was happening, and I really don't believe it's happening. But that's where they're coming from. Having rescinded that protection, we should assume that ICE, Immigration's Customs Enforcement, will begin enforcement activities on school grounds. And if they begin enforcement activities on school grounds, it will take place during the school day. And if enforcement activities take place during the school day, your school staff will encounter ICE agents. And if your staff encounters ICE agents, they have to know what they need to do and how to respond. And that's what a lot of this presentation is going to be about tonight. Certainly in the chat, if your community is seeing repercussions of even the threat of immigration enforcement on school grounds, we're certainly interested in hearing those stories as well. A 2021 report by the American Immigration Council reports that in 2018, and for obvious reasons, these aren't statistics that are easy really to capture, so I'm sure it could be more, it might be less, but there are 6.1 million U.S. citizen children under the age of 18 living with an undocumented family member. That's more than 7% of the U.S. child population, and as many as 500,000 U.S. citizen children experienced the deportation of at least one parent from 2011 through 2013. When we're having this conversation, it's not just about children who may be undocumented. It's about the effect of the threat of deportation of their loved ones. That reaches many, many more children that need to be, what our concern is. In New Jersey, 470,000 undocumented immigrants are living in the state. Again, estimates, that's about 5% of the state's workforce. They contribute a total of almost $11 billion in spending to the economy, and they pay taxes, certainly sales tax. 40,000 residents in New Jersey live with an undocumented immigrant spouse. More than 40% of New Jersey students live with an immigrant, and more than 10% of the students live with someone who's undocumented. I'm going to go out on a limb here and predict that in the not too distant future, when we come to the realization that our birth rate in this country is having a negative impact on our economy, we will actually be in a position of competing with other countries for immigrants. So that's what we should be doing now. But they're already among us. They're our neighbors, hopefully our friends, and they're contributing to our economy, and they're contributing to our society. We're going to talk a little bit about now the legal context and some legal things to be aware of. Again, you're listening right now to someone who's not a lawyer, but this is all information that's out there and publicly available. I find it interesting that after the Civil War, as they crafted the 14th Amendment, they did not extend equal protection exclusively to citizens. They did not extend due process of law exclusively to citizens. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. So I'm sure that that's not an oversight. I'm sure that that was very intentional. A lot of historical things behind the 14th Amendment, as we know. But if people are concerned that with the rule of law being applied, then they need to be concerned with the rule of law being applied to immigrants. Plyler versus Doe is a 1982 Supreme Court case that says a state cannot prevent children of undocumented immigrants from attending public school unless a substantial state interest is involved. As a
All,
matter,
if I could just interject for
sure.
1 second on the Plyler case, because we want to keep everyone here as informed and as up to date as we possibly can. There is currently a bill being sponsored in the Assembly, the New Jersey Assembly, which basically would require children of immigrants, undocumented, to pay a portion of the tuition to attend public school, to pay a portion of the cost. Just so everyone knows, this bill is in direct violation of this Plyler case, which says that undocumented immigrants are entitled to free public school education. And I've personally been in contact with Senator Vin Gopal, who is the chair of the Senate Education Committee, and he has assured me that this bill will not be going anywhere in the Senate. Just wanted to make you aware of it.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm sure that there are forces in play here that are looking for an opportunity to take Plyler versus Doe back to the Supreme Court and see if it can't get overturned. So, yeah, there's a lot of different fronts that need to be defended here when it comes to what exists currently in the law. So Plyler versus Doe, when we have talk about immigration enforcement on school campuses, it should be also stated that schools don't even know which children are undocumented or whose families or parents or loved ones are undocumented because they cannot ask. So that's another impact of Plyler versus Doe. A school, when they register a new student, can't even ask about their status. So that's why one of the reasons why it's hard to know how many are actually affected, but we can guess that it's a substantial number. And again, our mission statements, our community values say that we value and respect all students. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act is better known as FERPA, the federal law that protects the privacy of student records and gives students and parents certain rights regarding their education records. So we'll make reference to that as well a little later. If you are an educator, education, a building or district leader, you probably saw this memo in January 2025 from the New Jersey Department of Education. And it's simply a reminder. It's reminding educators, leaders in the schools that public schools are constitutionally obligated to provide all children with access to free public education. And educating undocumented students is not a choice, but a legal responsibility. So everything that we talk about in terms of protecting students and families is grounded in law. This memo was merely a reminder. If you look at the image of this memo here, you'll see that there's a web page that's provided. This is what the web page looks like through that link. So the New Jersey Department of Education has extensive resources also to assist schools in knowing what the requirements of the law are and how to protect immigrant students and families. So again, lots of good information available to you as leaders, board members, parents, concerned community members. The 2019 Immigrant Trust Directive of the then New Jersey Attorney General is directed that local and state police officers cannot stop, arrest, search, detain any individual based solely on actual or suspected immigration status, cannot ask the immigration status of any individual, cannot participate in ICE's civil immigration enforcement operations, and cannot provide ICE with access to state or local law enforcement resources. So what this all comes down to is if there is immigration enforcement on school grounds, it will come from the federal immigration enforcement, from ICE, because local and state law enforcement is not permitted to assist in any of those activities. There is currently an effort to make this directive into New Jersey law. And so I know, I think we also have some information on that that we'll be able to share. It's sponsored, and what you can do, we'll get that information out to you. What you can do is encourage your local assembly person or senator to support this legislation that will make this directive into New Jersey law.
It's called the New Jersey Immigrant Trust Act. It has about, between the Assembly and the Senate, it has about 30 sponsors and co-sponsors. It is still early, but they're trying to push it as quickly as possible. Please call your or email your local assembly person and senator and demand that they support passage of this act.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the potential impact on children now and on the education program. I'll let you read this quote. The quote is rather frightening and alarming because it implies that there's going to be a long-term generational ripple effect of this activity and even the threat of activity. Children from an early age seek to know that the world is a safe and friendly place. Securely attached children look to their primary caregiver as a dependable source of comfort and safety, which helps them explore the world with confidence. So that caregiver is a parent or a relative or a guardian, and we're talking about those people being in jeopardy of deportation. From the first time the children enter school, their unspoken question is, will this world treat me fairly? Is the world a safe place? Is the world a place that values me? And educators assure children that they can expect fair treatment and support from the wider world when they need it, and that they will be valued and rewarded for their hard work in school. Schools invest a lot to provide added levels of confidence by responding to learning disorders, addressing learning gaps, encouraging career exploration, all regardless of the student's status or national origin. So our schools place high expectations on all children, and in exchange, there is a promise, an implied promise from us that that child will get fair treatment and have a future of hope and meaning. As a board member, my board would recognize Students of the Month. Uh, and this was primarily and continues to be primarily a character-driven recognition of the student. But we would always encourage the student to say a few words. They would have their family in the audience, and they would talk about why maybe they think that they would have been um, uh, given this award. And more than once in our community, a child said, I came to this country not knowing anyone, not being able to speak English. I made friends, and tonight I'm being recognized for this achievement. And to that child, let me tell you, it's huge. And you could see how much pride was in the room from their parents. And we don't know the story of a lot of these people and what they faced to get here. And I'm talking about immigrants in general, whether they be documented or undocumented. But when an educator or a board member hears a child say that, we know that we're coming through on our promise. We're coming through on the promise of providing a safe learning environment and giving them hope for their future. And so that that should make any educator, community member, parent, board member feel proud that they're doing the right thing by children. Immigration enforcement, even the threat of enforcement, can lead to adverse childhood experiences that negatively impact a child's long-term health and development. Here are a list of some of the mental health problems that are being reported by children, not only when their parents or loved one has been deported, but just the threat of deportation. These are all symptoms of adverse childhood experiences, which we know have a long-term impact on physical and emotional and mental health and development. Educators surveyed in 2017 and 2018 reported several concerns related to immigration enforcement, including student absences, decline in academic performance, less involvement from parents, 84% of educators said students from immigrant families express concern about enforcement while they're at school. So, what can we be doing to create a welcoming school environment? Here's a list of some ideas that should be taking place really in any event. Um, but we'll go through some of these. These came from an Education Week article back in December. A welcoming school environment has to address mindsets. As much as we love and respect our teachers, educators, support staff, there may be lingering mindsets that these students will be more difficult to educate. And we need to take the approach of looking at the assets and strengths that these students bring and value every student's background and home language skills. So be conscious of mindsets that might be limiting in the opportunities that these students have. Evaluate and improve school belonging. Creating a sense of belonging in the classroom and in the school, um, just for the community as a whole, is so important. Making school a place where students feel that they belong. Creating a welcoming um, physical academic event spaces. The diversity of students should be celebrated and a source of pride. Again, in my local district, we have an International Day, and the students bring prepared foods from their home country. There are dances, and all kinds of cultural references and artifacts that they share, and it's really a huge source of pride in our little school community every year, and it means a lot to every student. Uh, and certainly, that's an important part of creating that sense of belonging. School leaders, be visible. Welcome students into the school building in the mornings. You don't have to speak other languages to do that, to just say hello. Encourage peer-to-peer relationships. Creating buddy programs are often a really helpful way to connect newcomer students with their peers and acclimate them into the school environment. And of course, take bullying incidents seriously, as we should anyway, um, creating that feeling of safety and security in the school for everyone. Any one of us who are American citizens should probably take a second and think about what it would feel like to know that their kid is going to school and they may not see them again, or they may end up facing some sort of really horrible measure of separation just because they were trying to get access to an educational environment. So, um, so the question is, what can we do for families? Support for families in this situation under the threat of immigration enforcement is offering expressions and assurances of support, providing information like Know Your Rights sessions, Know Your Rights cards, and we'll look at some of those. There are many immigrant resource organizations that are happy to assist your school with this. Immigration attorneys are offering these services. One of our local districts in my area here just recently hosted a Know Your Rights session for families. Knowing your rights if you are approached by immigration enforcement. That's what we're referring to here. And schools should make sure that they have a designation in the students' files of alternate caregivers in the event that a parent doesn't make it to pick up their child because they were detained. Here's some examples of reassurance from Denver Public Schools. Their website declares Denver Public Schools to be a safe and welcoming school environment. The district shall do everything in its lawful power to protect our students' confidential information and ensure that our students' learning environments are not disrupted by immigration enforcement chaos or actions. And Denver Public Schools has joined a suit to stop immigration enforcement and basically to once again recognize sensitive or protected locations such as schools, churches, and medical facilities. Camden Public Schools, their Board of Education issued a resolution in support of the safe and supportive learning environment for all students regardless of immigration status. Here's an example of a Know Your Rights posting that you might distribute or you might post in the schools. This would certainly mean a lot to a parent to know that those rights are being basically protected or shared so that everybody has a common understanding. Let's see, I bounced out. Oh, I did it again. Here are some of the organizations that support immigrant family rights. You'll get these again. These will be distributed and made available to you. But in these cases, you can go to some of these websites and actually download those Know Your Rights cards or flyers that you can distribute. They'll also do Know Your Rights presentations for your families. Again, an expression of support and basically empathy, recognizing that we're all in this together. These families are part of our communities, and as part of our communities, we care for their future and for their children. The sensitive locations memo of the Department of Homeland Security is not the thing that made schools safe for children. It is the people of the school building that make schools safe for children. And we will continue to do so, not just because it's moral, but because it's still the law. So that's what we've been talking largely about, is that what we're really talking about here is protection under the law that still exists for these students and families. In New Jersey, we have a couple of policies that you might want to take a look at. Policy 8330, if you are a Strauss Esme user, refers to the requirement of a court order before releasing student records. It might not be specific enough. Now, the policy also refers to FERPA and to state statute, but consider adding that no student records will be disclosed to local, state, or federal enforcement agencies without a lawful court order, and access to student records by law enforcement agencies shall only be granted upon the presentation of a valid court order issued by a competent jurisdiction, specifying the records to be disclosed and the purpose for the disclosure. When you make policies like this explicit, nobody has to go through and pull out references to court orders, which is already in the policy. You're being very clear about the circumstances under which this policy must be followed and under which court orders are required. You could also clarify the policy by adding that parents, guardians, or eligible students be informed of any request for student records. Include a procedure for the superintendent or designee to review and verify court orders before granting access, and require annual staff training on the conditions under which student records may be disclosed and the procedures to verify the validity of court orders. Another policy to look at is 9320, again using the file code of Strauss Esme. This policy simply requires that the district have a memorandum of understanding with local law enforcement and that all be kept up to date, I believe, annually. We know, because we just looked at the Attorney General's directive, that local law enforcement may not be involved in immigration enforcement. However, cooperation with law enforcement should be understood to include federal. You might want to consider adding to the regulations that school officials shall not facilitate or otherwise assist with law enforcement interviews of students when the student or their parent is the target of an immigration investigation or enforcement effort without a lawful court order. Again, consult your board attorney, but this is really already implied in the law and in FERPA, but it should be made explicit. A few things about warrants. And again, I'm going to refer on the slide to the Ed Week article from which I pulled this because I'm not an attorney. I'm just sharing information with you that I found that I think is relevant. And one thing that's relevant is the nature of warrants. Administrative warrants are most likely to be presented by an ICE agent. However, they do not show probable cause of a criminal offense. They are not approved by a magistrate or a judge, and they do not authorize an ICE agent to access non-public areas of school grounds or access school records. If an administrative warrant is what is produced, and you'll know this um, because you will have been trained and or taken it to the superintendent, who then shares it with the board attorney. That's how you'll identify an administrative warrant. But it's important to understand the differences. What's unfortunate is now what we really need to do is be training bus drivers, custodial staff, security, front desk personnel. They need to know how to direct an immigration officer in the event that they show up at your door. As opposed to an administrative warrant, a federal warrant is signed by a federal judge, and if presented, the school policies should require alerting the district superintendent, the district's legal counsel, parents if a child is implicated in the warrant. And again, school officials should not allow the interrogation of a child until a parent or guardian grants permission. So again, these are the things that you can't expect all of your school staff to know all this detail, but they do have to know what the procedure is should immigration enforcement show up at the door. On the right-hand side of this slide is what has been shared in New York City public schools. It's directing a process for principals, beginning with meeting the officer at the school safety agent desk, and a step-by-step guide making it clear what they need to do should non-local law enforcement, probably immigration, show up at the door. On the left side of this slide, you're seeing one of the Know Your Rights flyers that I referred to previously. Again, something to share with your families. And if you post it in your schools, again, it's another indication of your concern for families in your learning community. Another slide of resources and organizations that support immigrant family rights. You'll be able to get a link to these as follow-up to this presentation. There's a lot of information out there. All I've done tonight is kind of gathered it for you and show you where to go to get it. But it's all publicly available information, and it's all grounded in the law, and certainly grounded in our morals and our community values. Last week, we gave this presentation, and we got a question from one of the participants. I would like to ask our local Board of Education about their policies regarding immigration. What is the best way to phrase my ask? And that's a really good question, and I'd like to share some ideas around that. Again, I would start, as we started this presentation, with what the district already says about its values, and the values are likely expressed in their district mission statement. So you're going to want to go and find the district mission statement, look for references to support for all students or every student, look for indications that diversity is valued, look for indications that of a commitment to providing a safe learning environment. There may also be value statements. There may be inclusivity statements. Find out what's already publicly being stated by your district when it comes to caring for students. Look at district policy. We just looked at a couple of policies on student records and cooperation with law enforcement. Come to the board meeting that you want to speak at, prepared to recite that policy. You're likely to find, again, references to protections that students have and families have before records can be shared or before there's cooperation. When you go to a board meeting and you speak publicly, try to think about the examples that you have or you know of the board having done the right thing. Boards love to hear that they're not get beat up all the time. They like to hear that they're doing the right thing. Remind them that they are a board that has a history of doing the right thing. So your statement might look something like this. You can stand up and say, we can all be proud of our district's commitment to shared community values, such as the ones that I'm sharing with you from the mission statement. Given today's political environment, I wonder what it must be like to be a student worried about an undocumented parent, or a parent worried about what would happen to their child should they be picked up and detained. Given that the law protects the rights of students, and that our policies that I'm sharing examples of require lawful court orders before cooperating with enforcement efforts, here are my questions. Does the district's stated concern for the safety of all students extend to immigrants and the children of immigrants? If so, what are we doing to reassure these families and students that our schools are safe for them? And have all district staff been trained on legal requirements and district policy? Should there be immigration enforcement efforts in our schools? So this might be the kind of a thing that you would come up to the microphone, prepared to share and prepared to ask of your board. You're appealing to their conscience. You're appealing to our community values. You're appealing to their commitment to safe schools, because we've invested millions of dollars in fortifying our schools from intruders. If you're an immigrant student or family, an armed intruder is certainly the first fear that we all have, but it might not be a whole lot less for these families and students to be concerned about immigration enforcement. So again, reminding the school board of their commitment to creating a safe learning environment. And it just so happens that the next presentation that we're going to give is on effective public participation at school board meetings. We're putting a program together for March 13th. It'll be a similar format to this. We'll talk about how to become prepared, how to put together your statement, how to present yourself at a board meeting. So this is obviously certainly for anyone in your community. Right now, boards of education need to hear from concerned community members, because too often our boards either operate in a vacuum or they're hearing things from other parties that might not be so consistent with our community values. So you have a right to go to a board meeting, and you even have a right to go to another district's board meeting outside of your own community and make these concerns and remind and state these reminders of our mutual commitment to these students and families. So I do business with school boards, nonprofits, churches, doing business as Assisted Insights. There's my web address. There's my email address. You've heard from Mike and what the New Jersey Public Education Coalition does and the value that the coalition brings. Here's a QR code. You can scan that QR code right now. And I'm going to sound like an old-time preacher, televangelist, but throw a couple of bucks to the New Jersey Public Education Coalition. And that is our presentation. And Mike, I want to ask you to kind of curate any comments or questions that you see in the chat.
I've actually been doing that along with the presentation. Just another little plug for us. We sent out an email to you later this afternoon that gave you a little bit more information about the New Jersey Public Education Coalition. The funds that we raise, we're really careful about where we spend them. The first 2 years of our operation, we effectively operated on about a $6,000 budget. Not very much, but if you look at the accomplishments that we had over that same time period, which was in one of the documents that we emailed out, we get a lot of bang for our buck. So if you feel that this presentation has been helpful to you, we'd ask that you consider making a donation to our GoFundMe. I'd also like to again invite everyone that participated tonight to please join the New Jersey Public Education Coalition. What we truly would like to do is to be able to set up a subgroup within our coalition that is specific to administration and superintendents, because we think it's very important that superintendents from the different districts have a place where they can have a discussion, where they can compare with each other what is going on in their individual districts and share with each other how they're handling these type of situations within their districts. I've been trying to answer the questions that have come up in the chat, but at this point, we're going to open up the forum to anyone that might have any additional questions. And also, as I noted in the chat, if you should come up with an additional question after the presentation is over, please feel free to email that to us as well, and we'll handle that for you also.